leads less critical readers to think that he's just advocating open violence by post-colonial or anti-colonial uprisings. That would only be a little part of it, and it's a really narrow way of thinking about what violence is. And again, it does this thing, the same thing that the Euro-Christian colonizer, when they say, "Oh, you're bringing this Manichaeanism and making a big bad other out of me," it's a blaming of the victim that happens, right? So, like, it's the conditions of colonialism that make that kind of binary divide to begin with, right? And to turn around and say that the person who is the victim of that, who is critiquing the condition itself, is somehow making a straw man out of colonial history or something, is a way of blaming the victim. And so that we will see that kind of attitude, just like saying like, oh, well, there was an uprising or there was an insurrection or something like this among the colonized peoples. What violent barbarians they are, as if they were the ones who invented the violence, right? Again, that's a convenient way of blaming the victim that leads us basically nowhere in thinking about actual conflicts between people. We have to, unfortunately, dig deeper than that. And a lot of people who are, especially in the colonizer position, and I say this being a Euro-Christian myself, squatting on native land here, a lot of whether we call them settler colonizers or just colonizers, a lot of people have very, very short memories when it comes to colonial history. I tend to, just on the subject of settler colonialism, which is a huge topic right now, and I just follow my colleague Tink Tinker, who's Washache or Osage. Um, I just tend to read it more as yeah, settlers intend to stay with colonialism, but it's no less colonialism than people just benefiting in a certain country. And I think that if we just talk about settler colonialism, it doesn't allow us, like, if we talk about colonialism more broadly, it allows us a little bit more capacity to think about why mass migrations are happening so much in the world right now, which are the results of an ongoing colonialism. So for me, definitely colonialism is in the present. For Glenn Sean Coulthard, who we read earlier this quarter, or excuse me, this semester, um, colonialism has never ended, right? So there's nothing post-colonial about indigenous people's lives. Although in academia, there's a period where we call like post-colonial literature or post-colonial criticism, and Frantz Fanon gets thought of and or lumped into that category for various reasons. But I want to stress from my own perspective and from the perspective of indigenous peoples, colonialism has never ended, and the United States sometimes gets presented as a anti-colonial project in their with their American Revolution, but it, to the extent that that would have been considered post-colonial, it clearly becomes in the United States legal theorists from early on, from Johnson v. McIntosh and John Marshall, clearly embed the United States as a colonial project within the European and Euro-Christian explicitly conditioned. So again, in Johnson v. McIntosh, 1823. Can't talk about too much more of that because Fanon doesn't talk about it, but just setting the stage here. So Fanon says, famously, on page 35 of this text, it's the first page of his text, there's an earlier famous introduction by Jean-Paul Sartre, and Sartre has been criticized for misunderstanding Fanon, and I'm just not going to cover it. I just know that it's out there, and he's received lots of criticism for it. Marcuse, in the last essay, right, referred to Sartre's um, preface to Wretched of the Earth. So this is coming out in 1961. His first book is called Black Skin, White Masks, and Fanon ends up being after fighting in the war in World War II for France, he realizes that he's still considered a second-class citizen, and because of his race, and because he was born in the colonies and not in the metropole, and so this leads him to into psychology in order to uh, try to make sense of the colonized person's position, and particularly through a psychological lens. So he says national liberation, national renaissance, and the restoration of nationhood to the people, commonwealth. Whatever may be the things used or the new formulas introduced, decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. That's like sentence number one. It's a lot of people just take that as like the one-liner from Fanon and run with it. Decolonization is going to be violent. How can it not be? Colonization itself is ongoing daily violence. So it's not there is no option to just stay colonized and avoid violence. Your violence is just being enacted on you if you're colonized. He says, at whatever level we study it, the relationships between individuals, new names for sports clubs, the human admixture at cocktail parties, in the police, on the directing boards, or national or private banks, decolonization is quite simply this replacing of a certain
Um,
quote species of men by another
welcome. Let
quote
me try
species
and
of men
stop this.
without any period of transition.
Okay, I just want to welcome everybody. Right now we about three people, right? So I'm playing this introduction. It's basically a scholar that's unpacking also the first chapter. I'm just gonna play. Like, we can just watch it maybe for another 5 minutes, and then we're gonna get some reflections from the group. Am I audible? Let me just ask. Greetings, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Please unmute quickly and just tell me if you can hear me.
Yeah, from my side.
Hello. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm just gonna play this. It's a quite a interesting reflection, similar to what we are doing, and then hopefully we don't have to have a 2 hour session. We can make it 40 minutes, whichever, depending on the size of the groups and the amount of inputs that we will be getting. So I'm gonna play this for another 10 minutes, and then we reflect. I made some notes. If you don't want to give an input, it's fine. This is being recorded. I want to record the entire session so that if other young people, because we are doing it within the context of South Africans, so if other young people wish to see how their fellow citizens and residents of South Africa and Africa are thinking, they can always come back and reflect. So I will share the YouTube page where it's being recorded on. So yeah, guys, thank you for joining, and thanks for your commitment, for making this moment in your diary open for our Sunday sessions. So yeah, let me play it for another 10 minutes and see if there's other comrades that's joining us. If you guys would love, I would appreciate it if you guys can also just send the message into the group that you have joined, just to encourage others to join us, so we can possibly be a group of at least 10 to 15 people, because we have 70 people in the group, but yeah, I don't know, maybe comrades are busy. Reginald told me, KG said he's on the road. Other comrades said that they will only be available at 6, but the majority said 4 o'clock. So thank you. Let's another 10 minutes, and then we start our session. Thank you all. We can be done by 7 or 10 past 7. Thank you.
There is a total, complete, and absolute substitution. It is true that we could equally well stress the rise of a new nation, the setting up of a new state, its diplomatic relations. Um, Sorry, just adjusting the volume there. Um, its diplomatic relations and its economic and political trends. But we have precisely chosen to speak of that kind of tabula rasa, which characterizes at the outset all decolonization. It Its unusual importance is that it constitutes from the very first day the minimum demands of the colonized. To tell the truth, the proof of success lies in a whole social structure being changed from the bottom up. The extraordinary importance of this change is that it is willed, called for, demanded. The need for this change exists in its crude state, impetuous and compelling in the consciousness and in the lives of men and women who are colonized. But the possibility of this change is equally experienced in the form of a terrifying future in the consciousness of another quote, species of men and women, the colonizers. So that's paragraph 1. If you remember back to the Marcuse reading and the last video lecture, a lot of the quick responses that Marcuse is giving, the way he uses tabulae rasae in plural, right? The way he's talking about up, revolution from the bottom up, and the way that he qualifies that against Barrington Moore's interpretation of the fall of Rome as being a top-down type of um, situation. You can see that Herbert Marcuse in that 1965 essay is trying to, in his own way, account for Fanon's book here. So I intentionally had us read Marcuse first because it was easier to kind of situate him with the Frankfurt School people over the past few weeks. And Fanon is going to give us a kind of turning point to think about other thinkers that we'll read in future weeks here. When you look at Fanon's scope in this chapter, and I think that this makes him unique among all of the critical theorists that we've read so far, is we see that he has a completely international attention to different groups and struggles around the globe among colonized peoples, right? And in that sense, he's definitely influenced by like a Marxist program for sure, because Marxism and in terms of workers of the world unite kind of idea can see across nation states already. So his analysis is just operating in terms that will later be called globalization, right? And that this is something that we just haven't seen the other theorists, as smart as they are, and they give these like really interesting accounts of history. Fanon is operating on a kind of different level, and that's, I think, speaks to his own position as being colonized, even if he does have a middle class upbringing, right? His point is that you hit a glass ceiling um, uh, as somebody of color in the colonized situation of France. He's of course writing this, and comes across during the Battle of Algiers, or through as Algeria is battling France in the late 1950s to in an anti-colonial situation. And so he ends up being a writer and thinker who aligns himself with the Algerians in that particular movement. So he's definitely a political figure at this time in his life. He's an activist. And I want you to maybe somebody might be too quick to say that he, because of his privileged upbringing, he is speaking for other folks. I think that is an oversimplification, although it's a phenomenon that where thinkers from the so-called third world get charged with that sort of thing because they're simply enacting their own privileged status of education. And the reason why I think it's too easy to jump to that kind of criticism is that he will make criticisms himself of the intellectual who's bourgeois, who is of the colonized class, later on in the text. Antonio Gramsci, who we're not reading in this class, has a whole theory of the organic intellectual, right? So he's going to be careful about like the charges that sometimes get laid towards these thinkers as if colonized people or indigenous people are incapable of being intellectuals or something like that, right? Or they're incapable of learning in Euro-Christian settings. How can you speak for the people? You speak like you sound like me. um, he goes on. He says decolonization, which sets out to change the order of the world, is obviously a program of complete disorder, but it cannot come as a result of practices, nor of a natural shock, nor of a friendly understanding. Decolonization, as we know, is a historical process. This is to say that it cannot be understood, it cannot become intelligible nor clear to itself, except in the exact measure that we can discern the movements which give it historical and form and truth. Decolonization is a meeting of two forces opposed to each other by their very nature, in which in fact we owe their originality to that sort of substantification which results from and is nourished by the situation in the colonies. Their first encounter, was marked by violence and their existence together. That is to say, the exploitation of the native by the settler was carried on by dint of a great array of bayonets and cannons. The settler and the native are old acquaintances. In fact, the settler is right when he speaks of knowing, quote, them well, for it is the settler who has brought the native into existence and who perpetuates his existence. The settler owes the fact of his very existence, that is to say, his property, to the colonial system. Again, this is how I want you to think maybe about like a term like Indian or native. These categories only become necessary through the colonization process itself. And so they are, yes, the colonized is a kind of invention. Just like race is a kind of invention. The notion of the Indian is a kind of invention. It has reification, to use our critical theory terms, right? It has real concrete effects on these people's lives and the world, but it is nevertheless the product of a binary type of relationship that is set up by colonization itself. He says decolonization is the veritable creation of new men. So again, this idea of a new species showing up. There is in that historical process, we can hear Hegel in the background for sure. And Glenshon Coulthard was dealing with Hegel in Fanon's thinking here. In decolonization, he says there is therefore the need of a complete calling in question of the colonial situation. If we wish to describe it precisely, we might find it in the well-known words, the last shall be first and the first shall be last.
Okay, comrades, greetings. Welcome. We are four. Thank you for the three that pulled through. Yeah, like the leadership last week said, Fidel came to Cuba with about a battalion of 70 people, when he entered Cuba with the guerrillas, and eventually they, as a small group, started, and they were able to ensure a revolution is implemented in Cuba. So thank you, for not letting my efforts be in vain. 3 is better than 0. So thank you everyone for that's here. Um, I I don't want to take up more space. If there's maybe any inputs from Mr. Is it Kulu Lekani or Kruskoy or Chesley, if there's any inputs that you guys have maybe from the reading, the first 30 pages, he was now dealing with maybe I think the sixth. He was up to like the third page as he's unpacking the reading stanza by stanza. We can watch another let's say 10-15 minutes of this guy, and then we can complete his lecture with the next session, because with the next session we want to complete the other 30 pages, right? So we're going to take it 30 pages. Basically we'll work it out. Some weeks we'll have 40 pages, some weeks we'll have 20 pages, because we want to go chapter by chapter. So by the 20th of June, on Fanon's 100th birthday, we want to be done. Hopefully we'll have an event in Cape Town, a screening or something of his documentary on violence. But yeah, that's that. So if there's any input from the room, just what is your feeling, anything. It doesn't have to be in context of what we're reading. It can be in context of decolonization in South Africa. Because it is actually the Fees Must Fall movement that 10 years ago that re-invited Fanon into critical discourse, into the public mind of South African radicals and young people that are not happy with the current status quo and what Mandela's freedom has given us, But all respect to our elder and our ancestor also. And he knew what was his agenda, his non-violent approach to South Africa. But today we are not happy. So if there's any input from the room, can I just hear your voice? Just a A4 away, anything. Thank you, guys. If you have nothing to say, also just say that.
Everyone.
Hello.
Sorry, Rasan. Greetings, everyone. I just want to say, like, it's just a question actually. How does the violence of the past play a role in not being violent now? Because we cannot eradicate that violence of the past. So, can we truly be non violent in our approach and still get the justice we deserve?
Okay, if there guys, let's it's this is a generative reading, right? It's a generative conversation and a reflectory conversation. So I don't always want to, I'm not the guy with all the answers. I'm just here to moderate. So if there's anyone that has an input or a continuation, good day Zwai, Tazwai. If there's anybody that has a continuation on Kruskoy's input of saying that, Mandela said, President Mandela gave us this non-violent approach, and gave us this consciousness of a rainbow nation. And is violence, we saw what happened with the riots 2 years ago during COVID. I think it was during COVID or something, when President Zuma and his forces basically created chaos in the country with violence, and then it resulted in President Zuma actually being released, right, from incarceration. So violence had an output, but we also saw a lot of Indian and Zulu inter-ethnic conflict, right, within KwaZulu Natal. So the question that Krusko is asking, is it still possible, being non-violent? And does violence always have to be physical? Can it be non-physical? Can it be intellectual violence? And how far does being radical, take us? So that's what I grasp. Thank you. So anybody that wants to fill in on that, we got new comrades that joined us. Tazwai, Kanyiso joined us. Welcome, guys. We actually listened to a piece. You guys missed the piece, but yeah, we're still reflecting on the first 20 pages, first 30 pages of chapter one. If you guys read it, if you guys have a general input, please assist the conversation. Thank you. Anyone? Comrades.
Good day, comrades.
Greetings, leadership.
Uh, no, I just wanted to greet, to show my presence. Otherwise, I do not have much of an input today.
Okay, thank you for pulling through, everyone. Yeah, this is for our intellectual development. Yeah, we don't always have to give an input. Sometimes we are here to learn, and share. If there's anybody else that wants to give a small input, like I said, we're not going to be keeping each other up until 6 o'clock due to, I don't want to say the lack of vibrancy. I think comrades are here with the intention to learn. Thank you for noting that you are present. At least, yeah, as I said before you joined, we are not here in vain. Even if we are 4, 5, or 3 people, our initiative loves, and we will find value in it. If nobody wants to give another input, another direction to think, another question to ponder upon that we can give input on, and if there's anybody on the floor that heard Krusko's question about can we create a equal South Africa that is where we don't have racial connotations every second week, every week, because this school is racist, Orania is racist, we have corporate racism, economic racism, the struggle for employment, the struggle for what's the word, climbing the corporate ladder, whatever. There's a lot of coloniality that we still face. Anybody has an input on that? Otherwise, we can just watch another 10 minutes of the reflection and then come back. If there's still no inputs, which is not a bad thing, we can close the session, go back for the week, go read the other 30 pages, the next 30 pages, and then we come back next week. I'm not gonna we're not gonna watch the full session by this scholar that's leading us for this week. But we can watch another 20-30 minutes of it next week, because it's about an hour and 40 minutes, an hour. Yeah. So we've covered about 30 minutes already. I'll play another 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll have another piece of it left for next week. But yeah, that's that. Is there any other inputs from the group? Cruz, if you have another if you have another question or something to fill on that we can reflect on, we can do that again, and then we can continue with the screening. So thank you, comrades. Unmute yourself and give an input. Thank you.
Hello, my lead.
You are audible, Chief. Thank you.
Okay. Now I think all I can just say or attempt on the question is that uh, here in South Africa, our challenge is that we are all running away from intellectual revolution, which means intellectual consciousness. We are running away from true intellectual engagements. We are always sugarcoating things and are more inclined to the liberal ideas. That's why we are going to have the connotations of racism in everything, because no one is willing to deal with the root cause of racial system and its implications. We are all avoiding that situation. uh, it's more like we are participating in a situation of making sure that people don't get the true realization of themselves through conscious ideological understanding of their being and in the society and the role to play. What we can do uh, maybe is, like, for instance, this is one of the exercises that we're in now, that can maybe to sharpen our intellectual understanding. You see, even in our curriculum, if you go to our basic education curriculum, even at tertiary, most of our African writers or the left-leaning writers' content is avoided in favor of the liberal content. Once you raise something, Karl Marx is raised as a passing by. I'll make an example because it's carrying a revolutionary theory. If you get a inclusion of Franz Fanon in the system, in the curriculum, it's just for reference purposes, not understanding what was the ideology behind Franz Fanon. And in basic school, primary school, you'll find our students, they go to the level of matric not knowing who is Franz Fanon. And it's not supposed to be like that. If you can go to what Franz Fanon was writing about as an African scholar, the Wretched of the Earth, and just like trying to make examples of all the books that he wrote, even on issues of the racism, dealing with racism in a psychiatric manner. So if we can do that, we'll correct our curriculum, incorporate African literature, incorporate the ideas of Frantz Fanon and others into our curriculum, not just for reference purposes, but to understand what are these ideologies, the real meaning of these ideologies that were influencing these black revolutionaries in the yesteryears. We will be able now to create a new blend of leadership, a new blend of a society that really is intellectually conscious and clear. But that is not happening. Hence, now you will find that popular slogans thrive over the reality of what is happening on the ground and what should happen or to change the system. That's why in South Africa, it's going to be very difficult for anyone that wants to dismantle the system now, because even us who are in leadership positions, we don't understand any theory. We don't want to be embedded on any ideology, rather on the whims of what the media says, what these superpowers want to trend for that moment. We live in a social media mentality, or not understanding issues, but rushing. How many people do I control? How many votes? How many love letters do I get? Not what are the problems of society, how can we take the society forward? It's because we are not rooted on any ideology. Thank you. And except the one imposed on us, which is the liberal ideology encapsulated with capitalist principles. And thank you.
Leadership, thank you for your contribution to the session. Yeah, uh, you are reminding me that of how the SG, because sometimes the SGs of our 3-4 top political parties are very important to people to always with Observe, because they give the direction for the political currents within South Africa. And the SG, and I think Thabo Mbeki also noted to the constituencies of the ANC about how the lack of intelligent leadership is not making it into structures, and hence we have an anti-intellectual culture. And it's also the comrades of the EFF that have been sloganing this thing of making education fashionable. But then you would find that some of them, like so-called, their main thinkers, their main brains, their most charismatic leaders, like in Ndlozi and like the Floyd leadership also, you know, they not with the party that also advocated or positioned itself, had the posture that it is, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of other intellectuals and thinkers that we probably don't see within the ranks. But yeah, what you are saying is it's very clear. But once again, we must go to like Fanon, where Fanon goes and he says that, you know, the proof of, in the first chapter he says, to tell the truth, the proof of the success lies in the whole social structure being changed from the bottom up. Decolonization, which sets out to change the order of the world, is obviously a program of complete disorder. And I think that disorder is something President Mandela kind of navigated. He probably wanted to be seen as someone that can create a society whereby you don't need violence to actually create a equal society. But it's something that 30 years later we fail to grasp, because we still see the colonizer, the settler, the Afrikaner, the Englishman still living life, right? Where now we talk about the zone of being and the zone of non-being, which Fanon also says, whereby the colonized live in squalor and live in slums and live in townships and live in informal settlements, lives in rural areas that are not being developed. There's no infrastructure, there's no waste, you know, management systems, etc. So yeah, once again, we are brought back to reflect on what is this rainbow nation, especially like today we have Freedom Day, right? And we are not actually free. And even within the context of the curriculum, school curriculum, primary school curriculum, yes, they gave us some poets that are now writing some revolutionary poetry, but even the teachers, the pedagogy that they used is not necessarily revolutionary. It's from a liberal context. It's like, we're going to digest this, and then we're going to write notes on it, and you're going to come back, but you never actually given, you're not given context of, this is actually about the situation of how our people used to sit in trains and fear for the security branch to catch them, or etc. So I guess the liberalism is also within the teaching, the teachers' class that was given to us, you know, because many of them, like when I was in school, many of them were trained during apartheid and then became teachers, you know, teachers colleges or whatever, etc. So yeah, I guess that's why they took out the book where, you know, the from the inception of a new South Africa, there wasn't the complete disorder that would have ensured the people at the top are actually at the bottom. But okay, that's my input on it. If there's anything from the comrades, then just watch another 10 minutes. Right now it's about 20 to 5, so we can finish up by 10 past 5 or quarter past 5, guys. So I'm going to play another 15 minutes, and then we again come back on based on what he said, what thoughts he sparked. If there's no other further input or infilling on what Kanyiso has said, yeah, or if there's a question that we can ponder upon while watching the lecturer, then you can also just make us ponder upon it. a rhetorical question, and then we'll continue the session. Watch the gentleman, and then we'll continue the session. So the floor is open for any input. If there is nothing, then I will start the 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 lecture for another 15 minutes. Comrades, is there anything from the floor? Thank you very much. Oh, okay, so I'm gonna play the clip, and then we come back. Thank you, comrades. Thank you, everyone. And Kaniso, apologies. This is exactly why we are doing this right independently from the grassroots. This is not a university hosting this. This is not a faculty hosting this. It's us as grassroots people without political affiliation, that have left leanings, left intellectual leanings, people that want to start thinking critically, want to develop intellectually, so that they can engage with doctors and whoever, specifically on topics like decolonization and the lack of radicalism within South Africa and even the rest of Africa. So, yeah, so thank you, Kaniso. But this is why we are here, and we need to get more comrades, because now we are a critical mass of 5 people. We were 6 people, 7 people, some comrades left. But okay, we're going out there. This is being recorded, and we will have a good archive of us completing the book. So thank you. I'm gonna play the rest of the clip.
Decolonization is the putting into practice of this sentence. That is why, if we try to describe it, all decolonization is successful. So yeah, this is like, it's reaching back to early gospel literature there, right? This naked truth of decolonization evokes for us the searing of bullets and bloodstained knives which emanate from it. For if the last man shall be first, this will only come to pass after a murderous and decisive struggle between the two protagonists. That affirmed intention to place the last at the head of things and to make them climb at pace too quickly, some might say, the well-known steps which characterizes an organized society can only triumph if we use all means to turn the scale, including, of course, that of violence. You do not turn any society, however primitive it may be, upside down with such a program if you have not decided from the beginning, that is to say, from the actual formulation of that program, to overcome all of the obstacles that you will come across in so doing. The native who decides to put the program into practice and to become its moving force is ready for violence at all times. From birth, it is clear to him that this narrow world strewn with prohibitions can only be called into question by absolute violence. The colonial world is a world divided into compartments. It's probably unnecessary to recall the existence of native quarters and European quarters.
I just want to welcome Comrade Yonela. Greetings, leader. We're just watching this piece. Thank you for joining us a bit late. We're gonna probably finish up by 20 past 5. We're gonna come back now and do some reflections. I trust that you have an input for us. Yeah, we have done a bit of conversating, but thank you. So I'll just play the clip for another 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, leadership.
Comrades, is it audible? Just let me know if it's audible.
Always be slightly stretched every time we have to do with the colonial problem. Everything up to and including the very nature of the pre-capitalist society so well explained by Marx must here be thought out again. Limits of Marxism, right? The serf is in essence different from the knight, but a reference to divine right is necessary to legitimize this statutory difference. In the colonies, the foreigner coming from another country imposed his rule by means, quote, humane approach to educating the natives is that they need to be educated for assimilation, right? They need to be educated to become Christians, as the Christian schools, both Catholic and Protestant, um, uh, did in the reservations, and that's a longer history going back to the encomienda system, of course. So well before Spanish colonization is over here in the continents, for a century before the English settlers start coming in to Turtle Island, in the so-called New England, right? And then he mentions the Algerian people here, but he quickly jumps to this global context, right? So he says on page 42, all values, in fact, are irrevocably poisoned and diseased as soon as they are allowed to contact with the colonized race. The customs of the colonized people, their traditions, their myths, above all, their myths, are the very sign that the poverty of spirit and of that poverty of spirit and of their constitutional depravity. That's why we must put the D, the DDT, which destroys parasites, the bearers of disease, on the same level as the Christian religion, which wages war on the embryonic heresies and instincts and on evil as yet unborn. It's just like such, I mean, he's a beautiful writer, even in translation, but just that kind of ability to compare the indoctrination, which is tantamount to cultural genocide, of course, the forced assimilation to Christianity, at the same level as like the DDT, which is being the chemical of destruction of instrumental reason that's being brought to places. And he says explicitly of Christianity below, I speak of the Christian religion, and no one need be astonished. The church in the colonies is the white people's church and the foreigner's church. She does not call the native to God's ways, but to the ways of the white man, of the master, of the oppressor. And as we know, in this matter, many are called, but few are chosen. At times, this Manichaeism goes to its logical conclusion and dehumanizes the native, or to speak plainly, it turns him into an animal. So again, this kind of species talk and this kind of mentioning that the perception is somehow that the native or the indigenous person, um, uh, is a different quote species. He uses quotations all the time. He knows that he's not talking about biology, but he is talking about the way that history has produced, a conception that the colonized person is somehow either subhuman or more animal than human. This is part of what I've called, for the past few talks that I've been giving, and in my book, the Euro-Christian or European fantasy structure, right? That relegates indigenous people to the lives of children, right? So, like, for example, Bartolome de las Casas, right?
Yeah, comrade, sorry, I had a bit of a technical issue here. But okay, I'm here. Thank you for the patience. And yeah, this guy said he mentioned a lot of things that we think about, right? He goes so main like we want to deal with some of the concepts that's within this chapter, right? And he speaks about the dehumanization of non-whites African people, right, or the colonized people of the world. But in our context, it's our African native indigenous ethnicities, right? Which includes everyone, the people that experienced the first onslaughts, which is there are still some to be considered some of the most dehumanized people within Africa, which is the so-called Bushman, the Khoi, and the San people. If you go to Namibia or Lesotho or even Botswana, there's fellow African groups, right? Ethnicities. I don't want to use the word tribe because tribe is also a colonial word. You can or rather say language groups or stuff. Whereby the Bushman is referred to as Baswara, right? Which then also has the connotation that they uncivilized and they're like animals. They next to animals, and this is done by fellow um this is done by fellow African people, right? That feel that they have evolved more, they have more civilization, and they have more culture. But and then it also brings up the content, the topic of Christianity, right? And how Christianity has basically furthered the ideology of the Euro West, the Christian West. Um, so within that context, I guess the African people need to be reminded that they are not inferior, but we are constantly engaging with uh, our so-called colonial churches, right? And us as black people, we love the church very much. You know, you have huge um, African led churches, managed African churches, the churches that broke away from being controlled by European clergies, right? And they are some of the biggest churches in South Africa. You have the ZCC, and you have other huge churches also, like the other guy, the Modise guy. Uh, I don't know the name of the church right now, but it's the second biggest black church in South Africa. And how? So now, for me, from my question is like, how do we reconcile our love for the support and the systems that the church and the opportunities that the church brings, and how do we navigate that kind of a reality? Because we there with our families and stuff, and we go to church and we are constantly colonized spiritually, culturally, as he just said, the cultural genocide, or your or yeah, being put into non-existence culturally. And then we also have the thing whereby if we start practicing a bit of African spirituality, we are told that we are busy with witchcraft, we are pagans. You know, so our attempt to be to go back to our black self, our African self, and our African spiritual systems, you know, is constantly by the very same colonized people. You know, so that's just, you know, something I'm grappling with. um but is there anything from the side of the group? We're about three people. I guess we're going to be closing off within the next 10 minutes. If there's anything from your side, Yonela, Kanyiso, Kruskoi, so that we can finish up the session. But that's what I grasped from it. So it's also a struggle against being spiritually colonized, you know, amongst other things. Comrades, any inputs? Am I audible? Can you guys hear me? Yeah, let's finish up the session. We concluding remarks from the floor. Thank you.
Leadership, I think I can hear you from my side. I joined the session a little bit later, but in my view, what I've gathered so far is that the Fanon had a particular obsession with trying to unpack and sort of dissect reality, so that we are more able to wage a struggle that we have a much more clear concept of a conceptualization of. So for me, I think in a way, if you are listening to the latter parts of this context, to be dehumanized as individuals, it did not only take an idea of fabrication of stories, but it took them to take what we already know and understand and to sort of shift it in a particular way so that when we consume it, now it becomes something else, something different. For instance, the thing that Rasain just mentioned now, when it comes to the church, as an African, I can never be in church the same way as an ordinary individual who has not had the concept of Pan-Africanism and understanding of the struggle of the African continent in general. Because I cannot easily sit in the church chairs and listen and take everything as it comes. I'm sitting in the chair, but I have to struggle with the content as it is being given to me. In the same way that even if you go to school and you are being taught, you have to struggle with the lesson, struggle with consuming what you're being taught, because you understand that the lies that have been taught to us have always been hidden within the truth or around the truth or wrapped up in the truth, in a sense. So for me, one, it is to say it is important for us to constantly engage on this idea of trying to unpack our own society so that we may able to see what are the things that are happening in and around us that can help us define and may perhaps formalize a defense or to defeat the systematic elements or nuances of colonialism and imperialism that still exist today. But more importantly, it's important for us to go and tell others and show others, because I think that is part of the most important reason why our struggle leaders before had this inclination to write, to tell of what is happening, to tell others what they see, so that we can relate their struggle and relate their struggle to ours and be able to wage a much more better struggle. But what I know is that we 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 have now received colonizers from within ourselves. As an African, to struggle, it is means to exist. It is just to be an African and exist is just to struggle, because your identity is a struggle, because it is formed out of a history that has been diluted, fabricated, distorted for the purpose of colonization. It's a struggle to be an African simply because everything that is and around us cannot be taken lightly and without considering the fact that it's all part of this ruse to continue the colonization and the imperial project of oppression and exploitation of the continent. So, really, the dehumanization of our own identity has been so great that we find ourselves continually dehumanizing ourselves as part, or I don't know how to put it, but we have become the ones that are colonizing ourselves right now at the moment because of how this project of colonialism has taken place. That is my 2 cents.
Leadership, no, thank you. You are clear, and yeah, we have to. So in what I can grasp is when you say we have to colonize ourselves, it means we have to decolonize ourselves. And Leader Kaniso mentioned about the lack of critical intellectual engagement, and that's why we are here. You know, we were 6, 7. we will try again next week. And I trust comrades will inform comrades that no, things are progressive. Yeah, we will ask again for time. We went with the majority this week to say that no, 4 o'clock would be best. After 6 comrades are preparing for Monday. So thank you, Leader Yonela. Your words are noted and it's also being recorded. So trust in the future that a young person or an adult person that will watch this will also again be reminded of how we need to be conscious when we attend our churches, and we also need to be having the conversation within our church brotherhoods and church sisterhoods, even if it has to be spoken from the pulpit. If we have to engage on critical theology, black liberation theology from the pulpit, it must be done. I think that's also something that South Africa has lost of the Alan Busak and Desmond Tutu came with the conceptual framework of black liberation theology, but it stopped after apartheid ended. I think theologians and people of the row or of the cloth has stopped reflecting critically. It's here and there, because church is also, so as the popular critique goes, it's a business. So you also don't want to alienate the congregation. You don't want to scare the congregation off. So these conversations are also not being held within our sacred spaces, our sacred Christian spaces at this point in time. So thank you, my leadership. Kaniso Kruskoy, can we have closing remarks? Then we seal up the session. Thank you.
I think my closing remark would just be to say thank you to everyone for sharing the intelligence and thoughts. And then I would just once again pose the question: does intellectual consciousness ultimately eradicate us from the poverty of apartheid? Because beyond all theses and psychological aspects that we want to have on any theory, even our own, yeah, apartheid, I think, conquered us a lot mentally, and that's gonna take a lifetime to change, especially for the masses. Not everyone is conscious and cognitive. Thank you.
Yo, that's a deeply political question, Kruskoy. Yeah, it we need political leadership. Even the West and the people of the West are saying Africa will continue to be, exploited because you don't have leadership. So, and yeah, the question of violence, yeah, we do public disorder now, then we all get arrested. And you saw what happened with the kids the other day. It was tear gas, police, when they were, I think it was at the Walter Sisulu, or yeah, it's a university, whereby if we are outraged by our conditions, living conditions, we are constantly met with the violence of the state. If we are, even when we are gonna fight and assault a white racist, we'll end up being arrested. So, but it's things that we will grapple with and that we will overcome. Thank you for your input. My leadership, Kaniso, Kwarubana, yeah, Kwarubana. Any input from you before we seal up? Thank you very much, everyone. I don't know if Kaniso can't hear me. Kaniso, can you hear me? Mr. Kaniso. Okay, comrades, it seems like, yeah, the leadership can't hear me, so let's seal it up. I think that's that for today. Yeah. So thank you everyone for attending the session. I will now end the screen. We meet again next week. Thank you, Yonela. Come through a bit earlier, God willing, next week, so you can keep the session with us and inspire some minds with us as we start. I'm ending the stream on the YouTube. So yeah, thank you. This is me ending the stream on this side. Thank you. End. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna close the group. Thank you, Yonela. Thank you, Caniso. Here we go. Bye.